This is my neighborhood. So we live at the beach, and I'm grateful for that. But for 178 homes here, we have all been displaced. So our house was right up there on the bluffs. For the last 14 years, this has been our home. And there's nothing left. You know, there's a fountain that's still there with my Vespa sitting in front, a couple bikes next to it. But you know, it's just the rubble. It's like a bomb hit here. And I feel for not just my neighbors, but I realize, yeah, when we look up here, the houses are up here are houses that are way beyond what most people could even imagine. But I feel for the people that serve them, for gardeners and housekeepers and nannies. And so at a community like this, we're feeling a lot of love from people who are supporting us, but the loss is real, and seeing the devastation, it just kind of brings me back to what's lost. But I know that not everything's lost. Hopefully, you know, in a few years we'll be coming back to this place and to be able to see this community thrive. But between now and then, we're finding ways to stick together as a community and see what we can do to bring some hope to people that are hopeless.
Welcome to Beyond the Plate. I'm Paul Jacobs, where food is more than just a meal. It's a powerful way to connect, inspire, and transform.
We call it tertulia, a gathering where bonds are formed and stories are shared.
Get ready to dive into real stories that inspire, challenge, and nourish the soul.
I'm Daniel Patiño, inviting you to join our tertulia and explore how food and connection can truly transform lives.
Let's go Beyond the Plate.
All right, welcome back to another special episode, that is, of Beyond the Plate here in Los Angeles. Now,
Venice, California, buddy.
We've seen a little bit. We've seen a little bit.
Venice Beach.
Venice Beach,
Come
and
on.
our folks from Santa Monica Pier also having us today. But here in on location is what we like to call it.
There you go.
We have some of our own family here to tell us a little bit about what's been going on this part of the U.S. Now, we're here with Laura Anderson, one of our own from our development team, and as well as we all know, Pastor Steven Snook from Church Alliances. The fact that we're all here as family, I like it because it's an example of what's been going on recently here in Los Angeles and from the area most affected by the fires in the Palisades. Is every stranger is no longer a stranger. Right now, you're maybe a distant cousin, you may be a good friend from now on, and I felt it as soon as we got here, and unfortunately, it's a short while we're here, so we will get the whole thing. But the fact that we're all gathering for one main cause is something that we don't see every day, and it's unfortunate that it has to be right after a natural disaster. But this was something special, and thank you guys for sharing your story with us today. Laura, I want to start with you first.
Sure.
First of all, the reason that you're here. Tell us a little bit more about why you're here today.
Well, I started working with Food for the Poor almost 2 years ago, so I'm still relatively new to Food for the Poor, but it has been an amazing blessing for my life, just being a part of everything that they're doing. I've worked with nonprofits pretty much my whole career, mostly locally, and so this is the first time I was able to serve with someone internationally, so it's been a really great experience so far. And then I'm actually on the West Coast because I work with all of our donors on this end of the country. So.
And has it been a little bit different for the last few weeks here, dealing with these?
Yes.
This natural
yes.
disaster?
Yeah. I mean, like obviously Steve's had a way harder road than I have, but it affects all of us in a way. I live more in the San Fernando Valley, and because of where I am, I literally had fires on every side of me, like pretty much the whole week. And the one thing I've been sharing with other people is that, it's interesting with other storms. I've lived in the Midwest, so I've been through tornadoes, I've been through snowstorms, I've been through mudslides here in California, and now all these fires and et cetera. But like the thing that I think was so interesting about this particular event, usually like with a hurricane or tornado, it's coming and it's done. Where we lived through 7 days of that, years happened quite early in the experience. But for me, because it wasn't kind kind of hitting my community directly. Like every day I was on evacuation notice for 7 days, you know, and we never knew, like, is it time? Is it not? And like, do we stay up all night and someone else stay up during the day? And like, we were all kind of coordinating with our neighbors and everything too, because I have a couple older people in our complex just to make sure they're okay. You know, so it was just a very interesting time because I think of the length of time that it went on, and, you know, and I just want to give a big shout out to Food for the Poor because everybody there has been so supportive because it's been such a taxing time. You know, I'm still trying to do my normal day-to-day things, you know, but I've had people reach out to me from pretty much every department, people I've never met before. People were praying for me, you know, like, and I think they're organizing a prayer day for California. And I'm really kind of the only one out here besides Pastor Steve. So it's just so blessing that like people would support us in that way, for sure. Yeah.
And it's interesting because here we are at Food for the Poor. We're always, as a church speaker, as a development officer, working with donors, putting our focus and attention outward to the 15 countries that Food for the Poor serves. But now the tables are a bit turned and the attention is on this community for you all and those who, you know, who live out here that are part of the Food for the Poor family. But before we get to that part, I really want to know something. Okay. There's a story I heard why are you laughing? You know what I'm about to say. There's a story about the connection that brought you two. You just are not just two employees of Food for the Poor that have come here to interview on Beyond the Plate, a special edition. You actually have some history. So I'm going to let you start and you finish because is that good? How did you guys connect? This is interesting.
Well, I actually was attending Steve's church for a very long period of time, along with a lot of other people that became very dear friends of mine. I actually lived in Nashville and moved out here, and a whole group of us all kind of moved within probably a year, and we kind of had our own little Nashville. I think pretty much all of us ended up at your church at some way or another time, you know. And then it was just a really blessing being part of the congregation. And then because I sing as well, Steve was like really gracious enough, and I actually led worship with his church for a long time. I came from a very diverse church out of Nashville. We had black, white, everything you would want. So we kind of brought a little gospel vibe to Metro that hadn't been there before, because I had kind of grown up around that. So he was just so gracious to allow me to do that too. And then we've just always stayed in touch. We've kind of been in and out of each other's lives. I served at another nonprofit locally here in Santa Monica, and he was like in walking distance, his coffee house of where I was. So especially during COVID, because of the way LA works, everybody likes to give to their neighborhood. So we had like an overabundance of things because of all the companies here. So we couldn't use everything. So I called Steve and said, like, hey, Google's just donating like trucks of food. Do you need anything? Or we have all this makeup from whoever. Do you want anything? So then we kind of reconnected in that way. And then when I worked here and I heard, we're going to get into the more of the evangelical world, I was like, Steve would be perfect for this. And so then that's how we ended up coming on board. Yeah. You can fill in some holes.
No, it's really great. So she and another young lady, for them doing those gospel Sundays, it was so exciting because we were known for just our worship, but that day, everybody's moving, you know, and it's so much fun. It's a big auditorium, so you feel it, you know. But Laura's always been full of life, and even today when she walked into the hotel where we were and when she saw my wife, you know, they have a bond. So it's just very cool to think that these relationships, they don't change even over time, that you just know that it's a great bond. So to see her in this position and know that I've watched her along the way, you know, she's pouring into other people all the time, and she brings light to so many situations. So to be on the same team right now is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, very
even
cool.
though it's a very different way. But
yeah.
That's excellent.
So, Mike, you know, I really would love to find out as we dial the clocks back to January 7th, where you're under impending evacuation order at any moment. You told us that. You're dealing with literally the fire in your backyard, literally.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind at that time when this is all happening? I mean, you've got to be on pins and needles every minute, not every day, but every minute of the day.
Well, on top of the fact, like, so the fires hit, and the next day I got a fever and was sick, like out. So I was like trying to deal with all that on top of everything. And a lot of it could have been because of the smoke and whatever else we were having to deal with in that. And, who knows, the stress, I'm sure, probably doesn't make your immune system work properly either. But it was just a very interesting time. And I think, too, it's one of those things like how can you be worried when you have, because I knew him, I have another dear friend that lost his home when they lost their homes. It's kind of like you do that comparison thing of like, kind of like am I okay? And like, they're not, like it was kind of that thing too, like you're like, why the survivors, guilt or whatever in a way too. I mean, I think there's a lot of feelings for a lot of different people. And I think too, the one thing that Steve's probably shared too is just to see the outpouring. People, I think LA gets a very bad rap about being selfish and egocentric. But like, again, like with people, and that's one thing working in nonprofits in LA, people want to help. Sometimes they don't know how. But like with celebrities, I've worked with all different types of people. They really want to give back. They just don't know maybe to connect with the right people yet sometimes. And so it's beautiful to see, because there is so much money, there is so much wealth here, but there's so much poverty, there's so much homelessness, you see both things, and it's so good to see everybody come together, And
we mentioned that at the beginning of our previous episode, which was from the ashes is now a newer community, a stronger community, a different community that wasn't here before a disaster. And it's unfortunate that it has to happen with a fire or a hurricane or something that everybody tends to just drop everything in, right? We're no longer ex-neighbors or neighbors that we never know each other's whereabouts. It is now, how can I help you? You're helping me.
Yes.
And since we're all on the same line, it just becomes a different community from now on. It's not the same community that was there come December 7th, just pick a date here, right? Yeah. So that's something else that from the ashes, like Pastor Steven Snook said, it's kind of like the phoenix. From the ashes rises a phoenix and a newer future. I mean, it's palpable.
That's great. Yeah. We're here on a special edition of our Beyond the Plate podcast. We're just so grateful to the friends here at Moss in Venice Beach, California. That just sounds nice. Ooh, that sounds nice. I live in South Florida. We live in South Florida.
We're from South Florida to Venice Beach. I love it.
So thanks to Savannah and the team from Moss. But Pastor Steven, so it's the day that there's no more warnings. It's here. We've got to get out. What's going through your mind? What's happening with you that day?
Well, honestly, you're thinking we've been here before. So you had warnings, and then all of a sudden there's evacuation in Malibu, and I could see that. I can see where it's at. And then all of a sudden, the warning on the phone, and the police haven't come up to actually tell you to leave. That comes a little bit later. But here's the warning on the phone, evacuate now. So you think, okay, let's get a bag of clothes for each of us and let's get some important documents. But you're really thinking you're coming back in a couple of days. I didn't even think about going to the office, which is about 75 yards away from me, to grab stuff that I need to get. It's at another location. You get in a car, and we didn't get in all three of ours. We realized because traffic is crazy, we'll get in one car, let's get out of here, we'll come back. But what's going through our mind is you're seeing a fire and it's right above us. And you're realizing that could shift. And yes, it maybe hasn't come here before, but that doesn't mean it's not. But you're still not, it's not real until the end of the day when you realize it has changed and you're seeing something at a distance at my mom's house in Orange County and you're watching on the news and you're looking at the CAL FIRE map and you realize, wait, that's coming to our neighborhood.
I think Timer texted me and said that we just got an alert and it was in our neighborhood, and you're just like.
Then you realize, wait. You start thinking of all the things you didn't grab, and then you're thinking, well, but, and you just, so it's not the emotion that comes in the moment, is that what we thought was not going to happen could be happening, and I'm thinking of all the things I didn't do or I didn't grab and memories and all those things. And so that's, in that moment, I'm just thinking about me for a moment and my wife and my daughter. And then all of a sudden I began to think about our neighbors and all the other people are going through the same thing and are feeling very similar things, but it was heavy, and there's a numbness that comes and an ache when you realize it's gone, and you have to embrace it.
You talked about the history of Pacific Palisades, and I really would love to share that story. But before we do, a lot of times when people look at Southern California, especially this area, Malibu, Pacific Palisades, all these very wealthy areas. But this fire made an equalizer of everybody. Everyone. There was no respect of persons. What was it that was taking place in the community? Whether you're a tech executive or you work as a server at a local restaurant, what was going on in the community with everybody on the same level?
Immediately, the average person in the community seemed to care. And that might not be true a lot of times. It's like they stopped to listen, I think because they realized that this could happen to them. And they started saying, I wondered what would I take if I knew I had to evacuate my home. So in processing this, part of my processing has been through other people telling their stories, and to be able to just take that in. So sometimes we go to the place like the celebrities, and there was a woman that they captured on the news who said, we just remodeled our home, and we had to go to our other house in Holmby Hills, which is LA. This is just our house at the beach.
Yeah.
And now we had to go. And I'm like, are you kidding me? But celebrities, oh, we lost our home. But people love celebrity all over the world. A pastor I met with yesterday, Gare, a great guy locally, he said he was talking to a friend, and he said, Pacific Palisades, no one knew what Pacific Palisades was 2 weeks ago. They just were like, you talk about LA, maybe Malibu. People even heard of Santa Monica. But now the whole world knows about Pacific Palisades. And then they're like, oh, they live there. But we can't forget the people who live there. When we talk about food for the poor, and we realize Latin America or the Caribbean and those 15 different countries, the biggest population of Latin America lives in Los Angeles. Yeah. There's no other city in America. So those are the same people that do the majority of housekeeping, and I'm just honest with you, and gardening and construction and nannies in Pacific Palisades and Malibu. So how are they affected? Because they're the ones that send the money back to their families who are wishing they could just leave, but they can't. So this effect isn't about wealthy people, because I'm one that lives there and I am not wealthy. And that's a lot of people who live there. But the focus sometimes like, these people don't even need it, they'll just go buy another house or whatever. So the effects go really deep, and it affects people all over the world. But it does affect me, and I feel the ache now when I talk to someone else, because I don't say the words I understand, because I don't know their whole story, but I understand in part now because I feel something that I didn't feel before. And so if you can reach down into this and start realizing, so what does it look like to love your neighbor as yourself? And then I say, what does it look like to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength? And what does it mean for Jesus to say, these are the greatest commands, and all the law and the prophets hang on these too? Well, can I embody that same love for God and then allow that to overflow in my love for someone else? But that does mean in a city, and Laura and I can tell you, this is a city that's pretty self-focused. So we needed to be shaken. I just didn't want it to happen this way, but I'm believing that from the ashes where you began, this is maybe where we get to see revival, to come back to this city and to come to people who are in desperate need of a spiritual awakening.
And it's going to be a different thought process nowadays. It's not, most of that, like you mentioned, stigma, it's like, oh yeah, everybody who lives in that place, they're fine next week. Right. But I think it's up to us to really tell the real story, which is not everybody in there is as wealthy as their neighbor.
Well, I'll just tell you a quick story. I meet a little girl and her grandmother at the hotel, because we're in a hotel now. trying to figure out where are we going to live. It's so expensive. And this little girl got to go back to school because her school was in the Palisades. They lived in the Palisades, but she went to school in Santa Monica. And I said, what's it like for you? And she goes, well, it's kind of fun being in a hotel, but I realized I don't get to go home. Mm-hmm. And some of my other friends at school gave me a uniform because I don't have any uniforms anymore. Mm-hmm. And so she was in such a positive place, and her grandmother was with her, and yet she says, things are real different. So like every day now I'm saying to my grandma, if you're going to walk with me to school or to go to school, I want to walk. So how is she processing? So my heart for the kids right now.
Yeah.
Kids are kids.
Yeah. They won't understand probably a little till later.
I
but
don't
for right
get
now,
to go home.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing, which I think we kind of discussed earlier, is just the fact that because there's so little real estate in the surrounding areas, that like people are having to move way further. So that means all the kids are being taken out of schools and put in different schools. So that's like a whole other shift, and maybe even out of state again, depending, like where they can actually find a place to go that's affordable. So it's a very interesting time, I think, for the kids especially,
I think this is a generational thing taking place because this has a lot of reminiscence of COVID. Yes. And that was one of the biggest conversations was the children in school that couldn't get traditional teaching. They weren't even, first of all, they weren't going into the classroom. Second of all, it was classroom was in their computer. I remember hearing stories about children who borrowed mom and dad's cell phone just to do their homework, and then of course they had to pass it around, right?
They got internet from a coffee shop down the street because they couldn't afford internet that much for just a virtual classroom, that is.
Right. Yeah. But yet you're telling me these children don't even have a home to do homework on a cell phone, borrowing uniforms.
And most don't have a school.
And don't have a school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Don't have a home, don't have a school, don't have a park, don't have the YMCA that I went to. I don't have this, one of the dads said, my daughters kept asking, but what about, and she named a yogurt shop in the Palisades. But when do we go back to the yogurt shop? Oh, it's going to be a while, honey.
Yeah.
But she couldn't comprehend that it's gone.
Yeah.
It's a part of your life now. It just gets erased almost.
Sure.
It gets written into history.
Erased from the present, but now it's in the history books to come. But even the simplest things that probably that young lady used to do with her father every Friday. We used to go to that yogurt shop. That was our thing. It wasn't so much for the yogurt, it was just the experience. And now they'll probably find it somewhere else. And again, it circles back to everybody's again on the same level. Everybody now understands that I lost something, you lost something, you lost something. We all lost something together. And it's not just a me and everybody look for, help just for me.
So let's just use the idea of church. If we define church as a building, which is what a lot of people do, or a service, then you would say, but what are the people going to do when all of them have been burned down? There is a synagogue that is like a fortress with steel and concrete. It's still there, but pretty much everything else is destroyed. So most people don't go to them, but if they wanted to, they can't. So we are realizing this is something at multiple layers. The rebuilding isn't going to happen quick. So even what was happening in that last episode with Savannah is that only people that forecast into the future, or a guy I met this morning that could give me insight, is saying, this is a long time. So what is it going to look like to rebuild, and who's going to stay? So people like Food for the Poor that says we deal with people who are in need all over the world. But we're realizing that in America, even in the most wealthy area, people in major spiritual poverty don't know where to turn. They have no anchor of hope. They don't know, because see, for the most part around here, you've kind of given up on everything. So if you're Jewish, you say, I'm Jewish, but I might be an atheist, or at least I just don't, I'm not religious at all. And the average Christian would say, might even call themselves a Christian or whatever, but they said, but I don't really buy into all this. And they say, well, I'm just one of the nuns, N-O-N-Es now, or I'm spiritual but not religious. But it's in times like this, and this is a big New Age pagan community we're in right now, and West Side is. But when you've tried everything else and it doesn't work, I think this is a time where the lessons that Food for the Poor has learned about partnership in other countries could give some great advice for some of us in this environment to say, here's how partnership works. But you got to be willing to lay down some of the things that separate and divide us. And so I'm really excited that Food for the Poor can be a part of this.
For sure.
Rebuilding and restoration, because I think that's what God's all about.
And I heard a term, I read an article and I had to write it down, a term that I thought was fascinating called fire fatigue. This is an article I read. It said, and this was a city official was recalling their spouse who's part of the sheriff's department in this area. And it said, the veteran city official whose spouse in a Los Angeles County sheriff, who's a Los Angeles County sheriff's deputy who had been dispatched to help with evacuations, said the entire family was experiencing fire fatigue. After more than 2 weeks spent waiting for wind-driven flames to threaten their home. So they were just on pins and needles.
That's
similar
right.
to your experience.
For sure. Well, yeah. It was exhausting. Yeah. It
right?
was exhausting. Yeah.
And they said, it's a lot. I love California. I love Los Angeles. But this is definitely stressful. Can you identify with that?
Oh, for sure. And I think that was probably one of the hardest things because you just did not know. And that's the thing because like one of the fires, the Hollywood fire, they were closing exits from 2 exits down from me and going south. So if any time if the wind would have gone north, it would have been heading my direction. The Palisades fire, I'm 12 miles from there, was like coming so far to my area that they started evacuating the next community over because of the wind. So that's the thing, you just didn't know. You know, and then you have you probably noticed like if like a notification's going off like at all times of the day and night and you're like, is it time? Do I go now? Do I not? Can I go back to sleep? You know, and so it was just a lot. And then just to know like, okay, if we need to go, what do I take? And like, what do I leave? And thankfully, I think unlike you, and I think a lot of the other stories I've heard from the Palisades, because the winds were so bad, I saw this other Facebook friend of mine. She was like, I took my son to school and I smelled smoke. I didn't see anything near my community. So she goes, I'm going to go grab lunch. In 30 minutes, she came back, her house was gone. 30 minutes. So it's like she goes, I had all of the clothes on my back. And so that's, I think, probably one of the big differentiators this time compared to maybe others, that because it spread so quickly, or, you know, you even assuming like we'd be able to go back, you know, and then it's kind of like, how seriously do you take it or not? You know, all those different things. So yeah, it was a very, very exhausting week. And then on top of the fact I got sick, so that was a whole other level of like trying just to like keep alert and making sure, you know.
And what did you keep thinking of? What's the first thing you take as if that fire would have touched your backyard? What's the first thing you?
I was kind of like, do I leave? You know what I mean? Just because they're like, you know, my family, I have a lot of family in Ohio, so they're like, come home and trying to decide, do I just get out of here altogether and just kind of like take time? And so those are a lot of thoughts are coming to me because I don't own a home, so it was just easy. So for me to leave would be much easier.
Did you have a bag packed?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, I think I'm going to keep it packed because I was like, there could be an earthquake around the corner. Who knows what mudslides will be coming. I was like, I think now that is my bag that will just be there, you know, especially with my documents and stuff. But like, you know, you don't realize. So every time I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I need to have that in my bag, or that should have been in my bag. And you just don't think, you know, like so you think, oh, I'll have time, but you just don't sometimes, you know. But I definitely identify with the fatigue of it for sure.
Well, down below, just a while ago in Moss, one of the key leaders here, he's experiencing the fire fatigue as someone serving others during this time.
You're watching a special edition of our Beyond the Plate podcast. We're here in Venice Beach, California, speaking with two of our family members here at Food for the Poor, Laura Anderson and Pastor Steven Snook. And we're so grateful for Savannah and the team here at Moss in Venice Beach, California, for allowing us this very cozy. I say that if we are coming back for a West Coast podcast, we're back here, right?
Oh, we have to.
Oh, no.
Let's have to now. Let's see if she's available.
I'm like way too comfortable.
Just come on in, knock the door. Yeah. We know where the fridge is.
Yeah, exactly. But Danny shared earlier about hope from the ashes, you know, coming back from the ashes. And before we talk about revival, I'd like to take us back to history. You were telling us something very interesting about the history of Pacific Palisades and the spiritual connection with Pacific Palisades before we talk about that revival.
So the Palisades was owned by the Methodist denomination. The Methodist Church bought it as a place for missionaries and pastors who served their life to retire by the beach. The mobile home park we live in at the beach, which is a beautiful place to live, was a campground for the Methodist Church for those same people in the summers. At the top of Temescal, at Sunset Boulevard, is a campground the Methodist Church owned, and it was a place, it was called Chautauqua West, and it was a gathering place in the 1920s where they would raise up the next generation of Christian leaders. So they would come to this campground and meet in tents, and they would all stay there, and they would train them up because there wasn't formal Bible colleges and stuff. So they would come, and they would do it at Chautauqua, New York, and then Chautauqua West in the Palisades. The alphabet streets in the Pacific Palisades are named after missionaries and leaders in Christianity back in those days, in the turn of the century, up to 1920 and 30. That's all gone. All the alphabet streets are gone. But where that was, and the village there, it's like an amphitheater. And back in the 20s, there was multiple churches would come together from Santa Monica and the west side of Los Angeles for a sunrise service where 20,000 people would come. We still have a sunrise service on the beach where multiple churches come together for the last 35 years or so, and I've been a part of that. So we, in the past, was a history that then became now one of the most exclusive communities in America, but it's kind of lost some of that. But our prayer is that there could be more. But Los Angeles is a city that's had major revival over the years that's kind of come and left. Azusa Street. We talked about that idea of Crew and other organizations. Yeah. But these things that have happened here that are so amazing, but it's like in these last days, I think God's heart is that I don't want anyone to perish. And maybe I will allow a shaking. I don't think God's behind this, but he allowed it. And the shaking, I'm believing, is going to bring a spiritual awakening. But there's a need for revival in the church, so we can have a spiritual awakening among those people who don't know the love of Christ, don't know that God loves them, and that there is more to life, and there's a lot more on the other end when we leave this world. So, yeah, this is the history, but it's not been the story for many, many years.
Just after what you just said, I'm just thinking about how wildfires will change people, but not the actual place where it all happened. So I'm imagining probably another year from now, somebody from the Methodist Church is going to come back and say, this is where our history is. Yeah. Why would we want to change that? So I think it's now changing not only people, but now you're changing communities as well. So even though it's in ashes right now, I think it's going to come back stronger, and you're gaining other people while this process is going on. People that didn't know where the Palisades were before, now they do. Folks that they didn't know lived there, and now they know where they live and what kind of need they help. So what kind of help they need, excuse me. So this is unfortunate, again, I'm going to say, because this is the only time that we're getting together. We should get together because it's Sunday, or it's Tuesday, or Wednesday. It doesn't matter because there was a fire or a hurricane or a tornado. The fact that devastation just brings us together, but I think it's a little different now, and it's going to be a lot different.
So my hope, the body of Christ, under Christ's headship, is supposed to carry on the mission. But the picture of the body of Christ is not a bunch of little bodies of Christ in different congregations. It's one body. So if we could unite really around the mission of Christ under his leadership, we could show Los Angeles what Jesus looks like.
That's powerful.
Okay? But for us to operate the way it's designed means we're going to have to let go of some things. And that means I've had to do that, but I'm not the only one. But I believe that in the stirring is that the greatest, in America, the greatest volunteer force in America is the church.
Yeah.
Everyone says it.
Yeah.
But we are so divided, it doesn't look like it. Yeah. So this may be an opportunity in one place where they would never expect it, that it could actually happen here.
And even like from a cultural standpoint too, because, I think of everything that comes out of LA, whether it's music, art, film, it shapes culture, not only in our country, but across the world, that's right. And so I think if that can be redeemed, we've seen a lot of the stuff that's been coming out of the industry that's very dark. And I think if that can be redeemed for God as well, that I think will be part of all that too, again, but I think it's just people uniting again around culture, again around the arts, again around the church, everything. And I think that will all come out of here, So even around podcasts, right? Around
City
podcasts,
of
right?
Angels,
Yeah.
Los Angeles, messengers for God. That's our name, and it can be redeemed.
It will.
Yep.
It sure will.
And it doesn't take another fire.
Right.
One is enough.
Yes, exactly.
We don't need this happening every year to remind everybody that God's here.
Exactly.
It's all right.
And
One's
there's-
enough. If
yeah.
you're listening,
Good.
one
And
is
an
enough.
earthquake right now, that would be interesting.
I was just like, no, my fear now is
One at
that
a
because
time.
While you guys are here, so you could experience it.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think,
Emphasis on thank you.
Thank you.
but I think the prayers really need to be, because we're heading into our rainy season too. So I think we kind of spoke a little about that with all the vegetation gone. Now I've seen little houses fall off hills because of the way the mud will literally just go away from underneath the homes. I think it was near me in the valley, literally the mud came down the hill so quickly it literally pulled a grand piano out of the house onto the road and was just sitting there in the middle of the road. So that's another element that we deal with quite often, and because
real.
of now we have all this open land with nothing there to hold the mud.
Landslides.
That could be coming. So we'll see how that goes.
Another reason to keep us on our knees praying.
Exactly.
For this community and to
Exactly.
connect, because we have listeners in over 200 that follow our podcast in over 250 cities, 24 countries around the world that have heard your story and others on our podcast. But we're one.
Yeah.
But we're one.
Yes.
So this week I've been working on how to pray. 30 years ago, we started doing these Pray for LA cards, and I had a list of things. And I went back and looked at the list, but I realized that there's some things that need to change for right now. And so there are some specific things that I think could help people, and that I could even pass on to you guys. But we need prayer right now, so we can see God do what He wants to do, and we can kind of stay out of the way. But on that list, we've written it even in a way that you could give it to anybody, your neighbor, your coworkers, people that don't believe that you believe. But for us to be able to say, listen, we need prayer, but knowing that for those of us that are in Christ, we know what's behind these prayers as well. But for me to put it in the hand of the chief of police, or put it in the hand of a UCLA where I get to do some work over there, or among these people that are just trying to help, but we need your prayers. And so for you guys, as you share it with other people, just know that LA needs your prayers right now, and they need them focused, and because we can't see the restoration if God's not in it.
We're talking with Laura Anderson from our development team, as well as Pastor Steven Snook from Church Alliances. And a question for both of you, actually. Who needs more prayer right now? Family, friends, or community?
Well, I'm going to start. I'm going to say my family.
I was going to say my friends. Yeah.
So for me, because I know what this is like, when I drove up with my wife 2 days ago, and the first time she had seen it, and my daughter's going through some physical things. So one of the problems with me sometimes, and people that do what I do, is that we just start focusing in on other people. And I do care about the community, and my heart is there. But for me, my heart has got to be right where it needs to be with my wife and my daughter. They're going through this. And even my daughter's dog, George, who is like, what's going on? But with that, then comes this heart, because God then starts showing us how much He loves us, and He's going to get us through. And then we get to actually be more organic, I believe, in how we care for others, and we comfort others from the comfort we've received. So I need to receive, because I'm usually the one that's always giving. Right now, I need to receive, and I need to receive for my family. So pray for us so that we can then be the salt and light that we need to be, because she needs that too, and she needs to tell her
in a different
story.
way, in a different way.
Just in a different way.
Yeah.
Same question for you.
I think for me, because I don't have my own family, I think it's just a little bit easier for me in that way. It's different, it's very different, but at the same time, I'm just so thankful, just for the support of people from Food for the Poor. That's been so amazing. But I think too, what I think is very interesting, and just because of knowing Steve for such a long time, and even like hearing some of the little stories you've had in our conversations, in taking care of yourself and in taking care of your family, because I think that's the thing too, right? If you don't have anything to give out, if you're not taking care of yourself in a good enough way, you can't give out. So then you're just drained all the time. But I think too, it's just been so interesting to hear, just like in all your little meetings, all these divine appointments, in the midst of all of that, God is still working. God is still bringing people to you. You're still having conversations, and I think that's what's the beauty of it. I just think you kind of just need to do your day to day, and God will show up, and God will bring the right people at the right time.
That's it.
I think a lot of it is just organic, and I think like you're doing some things to even organize leaders and spiritual leaders, so that's an undertaking you're doing. So I think, it kind of goes in a lot of different ways,
Well, we end every episode on a positive note.
Awesome.
But this time I want to do something different. Because we just talked about greatest prayer. I'd like that positive note to come from all of you in our audience. I'd love for our audience, those who'd like to subscribe to our Best Bite, you can go to foodforthepoor.org/podcast or follow us on Instagram at beyondtheplate.podcast. I'd love to send each and every one of you that will sign up for our Best Bite the list of how to pray for Los Angeles.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If you give that to us in a PDF form, we would love to share it with all of you in our audience, because this is too important to just be a podcast, just to talk about it. Faith without works is dead. And that James 2 scripture was probably a scripture I read almost every day when I started at Food for the Poor. I had it almost every day. I would sit at my desk and I'd go there, because I knew that what is it that I say, God bless, go, I'm praying for you, be well. And I did nothing to help the body. Do something. And so I want to ask all of our audience, as watching either our last episode with Savannah from here at Moss, or right now with Laura and Pastor Steve, if you would like to be a part of praying for this community, praying for this man of God, this family member, these family members to Food for the Poor, we'd like you to please sign up for our Best Bite at foodforthepoor.org/podcast. Just go to Best Bite, sign up, and we'll send you out the list of how you can pray for this community. Let that be our positive note. It's a big drive.
Yes.
Thank you.
Pastor Stephen, Laura, we'll be back.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say. Because I was going to say, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things, right? Like, we have a lot of attention, but in a few months, that cycle will spin out, and the people are still left here to continue to figure out their life. And so I think it'd be great to do a follow-up, we see North Carolina, right?
Go to the party at the beach. You can be a part of it.
Tacos and people. Too much.
That's what I said.
There it is.
That's all I heard.
That's all we heard.
That's all I heard. Let's stop there.
Food in the ocean.
All right, God bless you guys. Fist bump.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bear Brews! Picture this. You're brewing an incredible craft beer, but entering the non-alcoholic market feels impossible. Well, we're talking about too much cost, too much risk. Sound familiar?
That's where Bear Brews rolls in, literally. They're your mobile partner for advanced de-alcoholization and pasteurization. Say that 5 times fast.
Can't.
No capital investment, no hassle, just results.
Their mobile tech lets you create non-alcoholic beer without losing that flavor your fans love. Same beer, huge new market.
Oh, and here's a game changer.
All right.
They recover the alcohol byproduct. You can use it to create seltzers, cocktails, you name it. More products, more revenue. Bear Brews!
Based in North Carolina, Bear Brews works with craft breweries like yours. Whether you're brewing 2,500 barrels or 200,000, that's a lot. They bring the tech to you.
Want to test the waters? Oh, I see what you did there. They even do small batch trials to prove the market, no upfront costs, zero risk.
So, stop putting that non-alcoholic market and seltzers on hold. Bear Brews is here to help you grow without breaking the bank.
Ready to grow your craft brew empire?
Sure am.
Visit bearbrews.com right now. That's bearbrews.com.
The mobile tech, the results, the partnership. I'm talking about Bear Brews. Let's make your beer the next best thing.
Well, I'll applaud to that.
Yeah, cheers to that.
bearbrews.com. That's BARE brews.com.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Plate. We love having you here.
Keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok at beyondtheplate.podcast.
And if you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give our videos a like. Just search Food for the Poor Beyond the Plate.
Your support means the world to us.
All right, folks. We'll see you on the next Beyond the Plate episode.
I'm waving.